Finance Day, everybody, at COP26. My name is Matt Peterson. I'm the president and CEO of the LA Cleantech Incubator. Hello to everybody on the worldwide interwebs. Thank you for joining us. Really excited about this conversation we're about to start. But before I do, I wanted to lay out my organization's call to action that we're making today. And it's all based on a report we did in 2019 with PwC and C40, and we released this at COP25 in Madrid, really recognizing that there's an opportunity for cities to accelerate equitable climate action by better inviting startup and corporate innovation. You know, cities have had things like Uber and rideshare and scooters appear on the streets and curbs of cities, which are certainly innovations, but not all of them have helped reduce emissions. In fact, they've actually increased emissions. So how do cities better invite startup and corporate innovation? We'll talk a little bit about that during the panel through the work of the Transportation Electrification Partnership, which several of the panelists have been very involved in greater Los Angeles area. And we'll talk about ways we can support entrepreneurs to help cities innovate, to accelerate particularly transportation electrification, which is of enormous importance in Los Angeles, given we are the car capital of the world, as well as really the epicenter of goods movement in the United States. But first, based on this research and report that showed us that we could increase greenhouse gas emissions, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by an additional 35% and create a $5 trillion market by helping cities invite innovation, we need the resources to do that. And that's why we're calling for what we think is a modest call to action of $1 billion global Cleantech Cities pilot fund, which will invariably unlock not just 5x, but 10x in startup parlance from private sector resources, as well as public assets that the cities will bring to the table to help make these solutions possible. In doing so with trusted partners like my organization or organizations in cities like Phoenix, where Mayor Gallego is from, helping be the trusted partner to create that sandbox, to accelerate that innovation from young entrepreneurs, from underrepresented entrepreneurs who have solutions to the climate crisis. And to help make that commitment more real, our organization is announcing today a $50 million Cleantech pilot fund that is made up of $10 million in the first National Cleantech Debt Fund. When entrepreneurs try to get access to capital, of course, investment's always first. They go to friends and family, if they have a friends and family network that can afford to write a check. If they don't, then they need additional support, particularly women and people of color. Black and brown founders in the United States need additional help. That's why our debt fund will be helping them. You'll be able to, these entrepreneurs will be able to access that fund without putting up personal collateral, which is really important when you don't necessarily own a home or any assets. How do you get the support you need to scale your business? So we'll also be creating a $30 million venture fund and a $10 million pilot fund, which is already in place. And one of the solutions we'll talk about today, the zero emissions delivery zone that came out of our transportation electrification partnership. We partnered with the city of Santa Monica to invite innovation from startups and corporations. So Automotus, the startup, is providing optical technology to verify that cars that pull up to our zero emission curb space are actually electric trucks. And that is being scaled with the $3.8 million DOE grant to not just in Santa Monica, but to Los Angeles in the downtown area, and now Pittsburgh as well, in partnership with Carnegie Mellon and the city of Pittsburgh. So we know we can scale these solutions. We know we have to and do it at speed. And that's why we're here to talk about what we're doing as a model in greater Los Angeles, what cities like Phoenix are doing. But before we do, we're honored to have a son of Scotland with us here today. My friend Brian Cox and his wife Nicole Ansari, who came to spend the day with us here at COP26. And Brian, having been born and raised in Scotland, knows firsthand the beauty of this country, the beauty it represents and is symbolic for the rest of the world, and what the climate crisis is doing if we don't accelerate the urgency of action and now. So Brian, if you would, I would love for you just to share a little bit about your experience growing up here, the beauty you see, and what's at stake for humanity at this moment in history.
Last night, I was in St. Andrews, which is where golf was created and invented. And I was looking out of my hotel window, and I could see the isthmus and the old course where they all blended, and these wonderful beaches that are down that whole side of St. Andrews. And in the distance, I could see the hills of my home state of Angus, which is where I'm from, Dundee, and I lived across the Tay. And as I was looking at this place, I was thinking to myself, this will disappear. This will be gone. And you know, I don't want it really to be gone. I want it to stay. I want to keep it. And I thought, well, I'm not alone like this. There are other people who have got views that they've seen where they live, physical places that they mean a lot to them. And these places are why we have to stop what's going on. We have to stop it. We can't let it go on anymore because we are losing something which is so personal to us and so deep to us. And I mean, I'm a little late to the party as far as that's concerned, but it just was a wonderful revelation at that moment to just realize that everybody, all of us, share this. And the other thing that occurred to me is this kind of lack of cohesion that seems to be between everybody, and this resistance to a kind of change. And I suddenly remembered that my family, I'm what they call a Micmac. I'm an Irish Scot. We came in the middle of the 19th century to work in the mills, the jute mills. It was jute in my hometown, the cotton mills in the north of England. And there were Irish, mainly Irish, who came, Highlanders as well from the Highlands, part of the clearances. And then we moved almost overnight from an agrarian culture to an industrial culture. And it was done. Somewhat unwillingly, perhaps at times, but it can be done. And I believe it's the same journey that we have to make again. We have to go to a whole new ecological basis for our planet. And it's vital. It's vital that we do it. And when Matt asked me to come today, I felt that I was, you know, kind of a little lowly with all these guys here, you know, because their experience is far greater than mine. But all I know is my personal experience. I remember years ago when I was filming in Canada and I spent time in Lake Louise, and they had they had this amazing, oh, what is it called? The white, name, at my age, names go. What's that big snow? Glacier, thank you. There was this incredible glacier. And I remember going back and seeing that glacier decrease and decrease and decrease. And the value of it, I thought, is gone. What's happened? Why have we allowed this to happen? And it's time to stop. There's just no question about it. We have to stop it. We have to stop it now. Now, the initiatives that are happening are incredibly mind-blowing, what's going on in all these various departments. And what Matt's doing, what this initiative is about, is, I think, a way of re-engaging the young, re-engaging the young people who can really, who are feeling on the outside. There's a feeling that certainly has been happening this week. We've seen it with Greta Thunberg. She's a little more aggressive than she used to be, and probably understandably so. But there's this them and us situation. So we need this kind of startup this kind of incubator like LACI in order to create a conduit where they could come, and a bridge where these young people can come with their ideas and they could be subsidized for these ideas. I think it's absolutely vital, and it's the way to reconnect with the young, to give them that opportunity to start again and do it again and feel that they're contributing, that they're not just protesting. There's something valid that they could be connected to. So this is why I came, and I'm very glad I came. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Brian. Mayor Gallego, I know you have to leave in a minute, so I just wanted to thank you so much, Brian. You're mayor of Phoenix. You're also co-chair. I guess I could take this up while I speak. Co-chair of Climate Mayors, which we've been working on together. You see the opportunities and the challenges, of course, for cities to be able to accelerate climate action on your roads and your streets and your neighborhoods and your parks. How do cities turn the page to going from having innovation happen to you and having to catch up or get in front of the parade, so to speak, to inviting innovation and accelerate what you know needs to happen in your communities, in your cities, and cities across the United States and the world, for that matter?
So on the first day of this conference, cities globally made a commitment to reduce 1.4 gigatons. In the US, through Climate Mayors, where we get to work together, more than 100 cities made a commitment to reduce our emissions in half by 2030 and then net zero by 2050. For me, I'm a relatively new mayor, so I will be in this office and responsible for meeting that goal. We've done a lot of modeling and planning, but we're going to need some innovation to do our part. It's really significant what's happening, and it's exciting. It's an honor to be in office at this time when we hopefully will finally address a global challenge. But we want to be able to do it with the private sector. For cities and local government, there have been real challenges where innovation has happened ahead of us and we weren't always ready. So depending on what city you're in, you may have seen scooters lying everywhere or bike share. We weren't always ready, and it didn't happen in the most organized way. Matt has great experience working with cities and the private sector and building that bridge, and I think that will be so enormously valuable at this time of what we believe will be unprecedented innovation. In Phoenix, we recently created a incubator for circular economy businesses. So those are businesses that take things that used to go in our landfill, generate methane, and now they're taking them and creating useful products. We've had businesses that are trying to take our plastics and create playground equipment or fuel. We've had businesses that one business that looked at mattresses, which we accumulate at a decent rate. The one thing we don't have is the financial partner to help them take it to the next step, and now we do. So I'm excited to be here as this Clean Tech Fund launches on a greater scale, because the need is enormous and we have so much potential, but there needs to be capital for these businesses to help us reach those emissions targets. We will regularly talk about challenges we face and hope there was a private sector a solution. For example, Phoenix recently created an office of heat response and mitigation to look at heat challenges in our city. Unfortunately, we had a wonderful mom in our city whose air conditioner went out, and what we understand is that she was going to reach out to her kids and try to find a solution, but she was facing some very significant health challenges, including respiratory, and during a very hot night in Phoenix, she passed. Are there solutions that could save her life that this fund can support? I believe there are. The expert is on my left, but I understand the electrical signature and the way air conditioners draw electricity changes while they near end of life. Is there a startup out there that can warn us and help us find solution and save lives and reduce emissions that are associated with inefficient air conditioners that really should be replaced? I believe there is, and I think if we have that eye to equity that we have today, we'll find those solutions. Right now, there's a very large number of energy efficiency solutions if you are an upper middle class individual and can invest with a lot of upfront capital. The fund that launches today will give us a chance to provide solutions for our entire communities and really look at, are there free tools perhaps that could help reduce emissions and maybe save some lives as well. So I hope to be here and be invited back at the 5-year anniversary so that we can talk about all the innovation, and then in 2030 when this fund is part of achieving those ambitious city goals.
That story you told is heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, and represents the challenge of equity. You know, those that can least afford a new air conditioner or upgrading the energy efficiency of the home, the one that suffer the most in the climate crisis. But given you have to run, I'll ask you one quick follow-up question, though. Having worked for Mayor Garcetti for 4 years, and he's now chair of C40, I would be in these rooms with mayors, and they talk about who should get the award for doing the best job of stealing another city's idea. What's an idea that you've seen in another city you'd like to bring to Phoenix, and what's one that you'd like another city to borrow from you?
So I'm just coming from a panel with the mayor of Houston, and they did open source data to look at how many people started bicycling in their community, and then use that to make decisions about infrastructure, and also you can share it with the private sector. So that was one that was very exciting. They're also planting 4.6 million trees, which I thought was incredibly ambitious. On our side, with our Office of Heat Response and Mitigation, we have the largest U.S. program around cool pavement. So asphalt is dark and hot and maintains heat. And we've found that a lighter color cooling can reduce the temperature of our streets about 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 to 6 degrees Celsius. And it's a difference you can feel. So that's one that I hope will be successful in scaling in other communities.
Great examples. All right, Caroline, you are with Edison, which owns, of course, Southern California Edison, and one of the 2 core utility partners involved in our transportation electrification partnership, which set ambitious goals to achieve by the time of the 2028 Olympics, and help set the pace for the state and the nation, really, in some ways. What's important for Edison as you move more quickly to the utilities ambitious, you have your own ambitions around transportation electrification. What's really critical in that path for you as a utility in addressing not only expanding your capacity, but addressing the need for equitable solutions for zero emissions mobility? And are there any pilots in your service territory that you're excited about?
Well, yes, you're right. Southern California Edison, it's one of the largest utilities in the country, and we have been very focused on e-mobility as part of our pathways to 2045. It was a paper that we put out a couple years ago to think about how is California best able to achieve its carbon reductions, leveraging 100% clean energy, and then using that clean energy in more parts of the economy, particularly around transportation and buildings. And in that paper, it called for 75% of light-duty vehicles to be electrified by 2030, and then moving on to a path of 2045, 66% of medium and heavy-duty vehicles, and 66% of medium vehicles, and then 1/3 of heavy-duty vehicles. So a lot of work to be done in electrical vehicle space, and what the role of the utility is to make sure that the grid is prepared for that. That we have a resilient, reliable electrical system, because as more and more of the economy turns to electricity to power, we need to make sure that the system is prepared for that, and the way that electricity is used, consumed, and that the grid is the way designed and planned and also leveraged, because as we see the future going forward, a lot more two-way power flows, for example, not just solar going onto the grid from homes and businesses, but even as we think about more vehicles moving power from themselves to the grid as well, potentially to help with grid reliability. So it's a really exciting time. For us, I think having the Olympics in 2028, I know we lost to Paris, but it's a real opportunity to set ourselves up to have the cleanest Olympics in history. And I know Paris is trying to do that, and of course, that's great. And then we hope to achieve more than them as it comes to LA in 2028. So it gives us a little bit more time to get there. Transportation is going to be a key part of that as we move athletes and visitors around the whole LA region to events. And medium heavy duty, as you know, Matt, is a big key part of that. So for Edison, one of the things that we've done are have programs that to put in place to help our customers achieve their clean mobility goals through a number of programs under a Charge Ready umbrella. And Charge Ready is a means of ensuring that the grid is ready. We put in infrastructure, upgrade the panels, and then have charging stations installed for the vehicles to be there, whether they are light duty vehicles or medium and heavy duty vehicles. Our light duty program that we just large program that we just launched early this year intends to have 38,000 vehicle chargers across a 50,000 square mile service area by 2026, a 5-year program, and with half of those going into disadvantaged communities. So we really want to make sure that as e-mobility moves forward, that none of our communities are left behind in that move to zero emission transportation. I'm very excited about that. Our medium and heavy duty program, it's a almost $400 million program to help, again, customers with their vehicles, forklifts, goods movement, go zero emission. And it's a little bit more extensive because obviously the power load from those vehicles is much higher than from a passenger vehicle. So making sure that the grid is ready for that, investing in transformers, substations to ensure that the grid is available. And then again, helping our customers with their panel upgrades and infrastructure. We launched that program. We got the approval last year. We launched it earlier this year. We've had high levels of subscription for the program. So we're very excited about it. In terms of pilots, we've done a few pilots that we're excited about. One is DC fast charging, so direct current fast charging. That's able to have cars charge much more quickly. We see that as a real need. While most people will charge at home with level 2 charging, DC fast charging is really going to be necessary to really have customers feel comfortable going to zero emission vehicles. And so the fast charging pilot, we were putting them in locations off major thoroughfares, highways, so that we could test their usage from customers. And then we are about to launch, pending at the commission, hopefully we'll get approval soon, vehicle to grid integration pilots to see the ability of vehicles to provide grid reliability solutions, particularly as we think about 2030 and beyond. So very excited.
Excellent. Very important stuff. Yep. Thank you, Caroline. Mary, while you were still chair of CARB, first I should say Mary is a proud Angelino, of course, as some of us here are, but she was lived there a long time and an advocate for our great city. While you were chair of CARB, we sat around the table with, God rest his soul, Ron Nichols, former president of Edison, and talked about the need to come together in a way we don't always see in LA. It's a big sprawling place, multiple 88 cities in the county. LA is just one city within the county, and we built this partnership together. And why was it important to you, and both as an Angelino, as chair of the most, at the time of the most important regulatory body in the world, really, to show how LA can come together and lead by example?
Well, going back for more years than I care to remember, we've been working to try to extend the reach of cleaner cars and cleaner vehicles to pioneer advanced technologies, to find ways to bring in the fuels to match, and made a lot of progress from what smog was like, once upon a time in Los Angeles, and we're very proud of that. But we would always come up against this wall that said, okay, we're working on the vehicles, we're working on the fuels, but people are still going to be driving these things. There are more of them coming all the time. They're being driven more miles, and we're not having a real impact on either shifting people to being car sharing or taking transit or being in cities where they don't have to drive at all to get to where they want to go. This is like the third leg of the stool that people are always talking about, the famous three-legged stool of transportation. And there was one leg that didn't seem to be moving. And that I'm going to give you a certain amount of credit on this one, because I believe you were still with the city, or you were just leaving the city, having been in charge of the sustainability office there under Mayor Garcetti and working with this Cleantech incubator. And you were talking about what you could do to accelerate the shift to electric vehicles. And as I recall, a pretty serious conversation about that. I put it to you that this was something that it needed a breakthrough, that we were still kind of stuck. You know, we could put more money out there for various kinds of incentive programs for the vehicles. We could do more, probably, well, certainly on the freight side of things, but it was the cities, the local governments that were experiencing the worst effects of congestion and air pollution. And at the same time, you had Los Angeles specifically wanting to step up and be a real leader on climate change. So how do you put these pieces together? And it seemed like the answer was to do something that no one had ever really succeeded in doing in our region before, which was to bring together the state and local governments and the various regional bodies that have some piece of responsibility for this. Add the state, because federal money flows through the states for all transportation initiatives and is very much, even though it's supposedly a bottoms-up planning process, the reality is that it's the state that kind of aggregates all the money and makes decisions about where the priorities are going to be. Could you create some new entity that would harness all this energy and make a difference? And you did. You did. We created, I helped bring the state to the table, and I'm very happy to have been able to play that role. And lo and behold, when my sister agency officials, who by and large were not from Los Angeles and therefore hardly ever all that interested in what we were doing in Los Angeles, but when they began to see the momentum and the demand that was coming forward for more support from them for our efforts to electrify everything that we could electrify, and to support that with more charging, better ways of allowing for vehicles to be utilized in communities where people aren't buying many new cars, but still they buy used cars. Where were they coming from? How could we get more electric used cars out there on the road? The whole list of things that you can see as either opportunities or obstacles became part of the plan that LA was working on, and it did make a difference. It has made a difference. We can see it in the initiatives like the zero emission freight project in Santa Monica and a whole range of other specific ideas that people come up with, because they have a place to go now at this project where there are other people who are interested in doing the same thing. A lot of private companies, people who had technologies, the electric utilities, of course, all brought support. And, it's like the old children's story about the stone soup. One person brings the carrot, another person brings the potato, and pretty soon, you've got a nice soup. And I think that's what's been happening. So I'm proud that we were able to support that with some state funds as well as federal funds, but it was a collective effort that made it happen.
Thank you, Mary. We couldn't have done it without you. It's you're just you've your political acumen of knowing when to nudge, when to step back, when to lead. We couldn't have done it without you. So thank you. It was an honor to create that together. Spencer, you're with an automaker who wants to go faster on electrifying everything. Not every automaker representative can say that, but you also have a background, in addition to your role with Audi, you have a background in working with cities from the seat of philanthropy. So based on that, what's an example that you have of where cities have done a good job inviting innovation and figuring some of this out?
Thanks, Matt. And I just want to note and commend Mary's work. I'm relatively new to the industry. I've been in the industry for 3 years, but it really was through the efforts of Mary and her colleagues that enabled this step change, really, in the way that we think about transportation. And I should note, before I was with Audi, I was in philanthropy, but before that, I was working as a climate scientist, doing research on sea level rise up in Seattle. So you might say, well, why would a climate scientist be working for an auto company right now? And it came clear to me when I was essentially working in philanthropy for Paul Allen, who's the co-founder of Microsoft. I was running his philanthropic work in climate and energy. It was clear to all of us that transportation was the next big nugget that had to be cracked. It was the #1 source of greenhouse gases. That I think became true in February of 2017, 2016. So this was the big challenge. And as a climate scientist, I was tired of just doing studies and telling people how bad things were going to get. I wanted to actually get directly involved in change, and had actually collaborated with Mary when I worked for Governor Gregoire up in Washington State when we were working on the initial cap and trade program. So this was an opportunity for me as a former regulator, as a climate scientist, to get directly involved in the root cause, which is the 17 million cars we sell every year in the United States, and LA has a lot of them. I mean, the car capital of the world, right, is both a curse and a blessing, right? It's this, in the 1950s and 1960s, it was really cool, but you have these air quality problems. And so it became sort of the scourge for the city. And now it can be the electric vehicle capital of the world. Well, maybe Norway is going to already stake claim to that, but regardless, in terms of a major metro center who's going to be host to the Olympics, had the leadership of Mary, we've got Matt, we've got the mayor of LA, and all of these players coming together. When I advised the leadership of Audi, like, where can we make a difference? I said, we have to engage in this effort in Los Angeles. This is the place to make the mark. We're going to be bringing more electric vehicles to the market in 2021 than any other automaker in terms of the number of models. Tesla, to be clear, is outselling everybody, and to their credit, they have sort of led the way. But Audi is betting the farm. We are essentially pivoting to become a full electric vehicle car manufacturer. 2025 will be the last year that we release a new internal combustion engine vehicle. Everything beyond 2025 will be all electric. So listen, this is an existential question for the company. It's only through this kind of partnership, which I would say is incredibly unique, that we can demonstrate not just to the rest of the country, but to the world what's possible. And the Olympics coming to LA is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that. So Matt asked me what other cities have done some neat things. When I was working in philanthropy, we co-funded the Smart City Challenge with the Department of Transportation. We in fact funded all of the electric vehicle portion of that effort, and Columbus, Ohio was chosen among 5 cities as the finalists. And it wasn't because they necessarily had the best proposal. It's because they could represent what's possible in the heart of the former sort of industrial Midwest, right? Columbus was trying to redefine their future. They said, listen, we don't really know what to do. LA, San Francisco, Boulder, Seattle, those are the cities that are already moving forward, but gosh, we want to catch up with those cities. And so Columbus, Ohio said, listen, we're going to throw everything on the table. We want to learn from LA. We want to learn from Portland, from Seattle. Like, what can we do as a Midwest city to demonstrate to the rest of the country what's possible on electric vehicles? The punchline here is they knocked it out of the park. They met every single goal that we established for them as their funder, and demonstrated that even a city in the heart of the Midwest can figure this out with an electric utility partner. They had American Electric Power, AEP, which is a large utility, essentially do a 180-degree pivot from what they were all about, which was coal-fired power and, you know, traditional utility thinking, to say, hey, wait a minute, this is a new feature for us too. So Columbus, Ohio brought together a lot of partners that you wouldn't have expected to come together, just like LA is doing. So listen, I think it's going to be the Columbus, Ohio's, it's going to be the LA's, it's going to be the Santa Monica's, and it's going to be, who knows, Detroit. There's a whole host of other cities, and unfortunately the mayor left. We've got the mayor of Phoenix here, that are all seeing their future in this new technology. And I think, as Brian so eloquently said, we've gone through big changes in our history. Let's not be scared of it. Let's embrace it, because this represents a better future. And Audi's really excited to be part of that. Our tagline is Vorsprung durch Technik, which Nicole understands. It's progress through technology. That used to be defined by Audi Quattro, by having really cool vehicles. Now it's defined by, can we get to zero emission as quick as we can, but still have a compelling driving experience for our customers? And we're part of the Volkswagen group, so it's not just about the premium vehicles, it's about the EVs for the masses. The Volkswagen brand has the ID.4, which is a much more affordable vehicle. So all across the brands of the Volkswagen Group, we're going to be bringing electric vehicles into the market, and we're super excited to be part of this group that Matt's assembled, and watch what they can do, because I think there's going to be some great things happening.
Excellent. Very exciting. Thank you, Spencer. Well, we're going to need all those Audis on the road that we see now that in LA to be electric to meet this very aggressive target we all set together, which is 80% of all the cars sold in LA County have to be electric by 2028 to meet our target of 30% by that time of cars on the road, I should say. Yeah.
Add something to what I said before and to this whole panel, if I may, just to say that this is what's happening in transportation is actually a wonderful example of what I think John Kerry was trying to do earlier today in terms of injecting optimism into this whole proceeding, because we all know that the picture in terms of what the national governments are doing is not where we would like it to be, okay? I think everybody can recognize that. But here you have examples of cities and states, regions stepping forward and doing the things they can do that are within their own power, their own abilities, feeling good about it, actually making a measurable difference that will contribute towards achieving those national goals and changing the whole course of what was once considered the toughest nut to crack, which was the transportation system. I mean, people didn't believe that you were going to be able to make the changes that are now really happening. So obviously I'm proud of what California has been able to do and what our utility and our partners in the auto industry have been able to do. But I just want to underscore what Spencer was saying before, that you Columbus, you Nashville, you whoever, you could do this too at home.
Yeah. I mean, Mayor Phoenix was part of this, of the climate mayors, but when I was with Mayor Garcetti, we knew, we got the sense, of course, Trump was going to pull out of Paris Climate Agreement. So we were ready that day to have mayors stand up and say, hey, the U.S. may be saying we're pulling out, but we are in on Paris, and we continue to see that leadership from cities and regions, and what you were able to achieve as chair of CARB to get other states to follow your zero emission vehicle regulations. And I think, 14 other states now, is just game changing. Of course, without that leadership at federal level, without Congress acting, thanks to Joe Manchin and the like, let alone the Republicans, we need that local and state leadership. Caroline, we've seen with the headlines about the ships stacked up outside the harbors of the harbor of San Pedro Harbor, the ports of LA and Long Beach. The supply chain crisis is in the news. We're moved to 24/7 operations, which means the goods can get off the ships a little quicker. That means more pollution in the communities. So as we need to pivot to zero emissions goods movement, talk to us about the importance of what that represents and what Edison is doing. You talked a little bit about before, but if you could expand a little bit more so everybody understands just how much air pollution and climate pollution comes from that sector, and why moving to zero emission trucks is so important.
Yeah, I think, someone said LA being the car capital of the world. I think it's also the goods movement capital of the world. And we're seeing that play out right now with the ships hanging out and everyone's Christmas holidays maybe being in jeopardy. The ports play a pivotal role in the economy of Southern California, certainly. They're also the largest contributor to air pollution in Southern California. And Southern California has still the record for the worst air quality in the country. So if we're going to really address air quality challenges in Southern California, we have to go after transport, and it really starts with the goods movement from the ports to the warehouses and beyond. So electrification of the ports, going to zero emissions is critical. Also, when you think about the disadvantaged communities, the communities that are underrepresented, they live along the transport corridors from the port to the warehouses. And so again, that zero emission transport is critical for their quality of life and their health, because we've seen the impact that the pollution has had in those neighborhoods. And so addressing that and getting to improved air quality is really critical. For Edison, being on Finance Day here at the COP, I think one of the things we really have to think about is the money, and where is the money to really move these shippers, to move the truckers to zero emission. For us, we're investing in the infrastructure. We're putting almost $800 million behind EV charging infrastructure, additional almost $4 to $5 billion a year into the grid to make sure it's ready and resilient and reliable. The state, it was an incredible year for the state of California. The budget they put forward on climate, it was just an incredible recognition of the need of the work. So I think both the governor's side as well as the legislature really coming together with a record-breaking number for climate, including in infrastructure, including in incentives to help fund those vehicles. I think the port themselves, Mary will talk about this, have been slower to the table. And so we have work to do to convince our friends at the ports around moving more quickly. And we do have a sense of urgency, not just because of the Olympics, but really for clean air goals that are requirements, really, the mandates at the federal level that we have to get at. So work to be done there, but we do see, I mean, the Port of Long Beach has a zero emission terminal. It is, it's fantastic. I mean, an all electric terminal. It's not zero emission yet, but it's an all electric terminal. It's really a marvel of just incredible engineering and design and moving forward with urgency. I urge anyone to go see it. It's just really amazing, and it's so quiet and so clean. So from a safety perspective, right, the workers are so much safer because you don't have the noise distraction. It's quieter for that reason. The automation design in this port terminal is incredible as well. So it's really an example of what the other terminals at the port can do and what Port of LA can do as well, and then just nationally and globally. So it's really a marvel. And we see that elsewhere. I mean, I've seen other ports, well, I haven't seen them. I'm happy to go visit them, but other ports doing the same thing globally. And I do think it's showing signs of progress, just more to do there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know they just finally, the Port of LA and Long Beach, at least the Port of LA is talking about need for zero emissions now, not waiting, which is a little bit of progress, but not the progress we need. Mary, exactly. No more blah, blah, blah. Let's get to action. Mary, you as you may have a worldview when you're chair of carbon, you continue to play a role in so many ways in advising and leading different august bodies to head in this direction. We've not seen sort of the sweeping change we need at the federal level. Of course, you talked about the hope that Senator Envoy Kerry is presenting with the leadership of cities and states and regions. You had to put many rules in place and programs in place at CARB. What's a rule that people may not be aware of that you're really proud of that is, you know, changing things that could be a model for other states to follow that maybe they don't even know yet?
California is unique, and we have to recognize that we have an opportunity that other states don't have to set emission standards. And we recognize that because of the Federal Clean Air Act and the fact that our foremothers and fathers, you know, going back to Ronald Reagan and Pete Wilson, fought for California to have that right because our pollution problem was so bad that they recognized that we were going to have to go further than other parts of the country might be willing to go. So it's not really so much one rule that we did that changed the game. I do think that the zero emission vehicle mandate was at the time and still something that no one had ever tried before, frankly.
Tesla for a long time, and
Yeah,
all
had
that.
Many side effects that no one was even thinking about at the time. No question about that. I can't claim credit for that. That was put in under a Republican chair of CARB. I wasn't around, and in fact, I might not have done it. I will say that now. At the time, because it was so different in philosophy. We had never tried ordering companies to sell a particular kind of car. We tried to set neutral science-based standards with an emissions level that would meet the need for improvement, but never to tell people how they would actually do it, even though to set those standards, you still had to know an awful lot and be able to predict where they would go with it. There probably would have been some backdoor way we could have gotten to the same place, but that isn't what they did. They just went out and said, percentage wise, if you sell cars in California, this is what you're going to have to do. And if you don't, you're going to have to buy credits from somebody who does. Enter Elon Musk, or actually the people who owned the company before him, who did finance their early operations largely because of these credits that we created. In some ways, probably a less well-known rule that we did was the low carbon fuel standard, which is also now generated billions of dollars in value for startup companies, in some cases that nobody has even heard of, who are making zero emission fuels. And it has also helped the utilities to up their game when it came to charging, and the hydrogen investments that have been made by the state. These are all things that are being financed essentially by the incumbent oil industry, the people who sell gasoline for conventional vehicles, having to either change their fuel or buy credits. And that has made us the hotspot for investment now in zero carbon fuels. So that's probably the one that I would choose to elevate at the moment.
Yeah, LCFS has been a game changer. Thank you, Mary. Last question we'll ask panel if they have any questions before we wrap up. The audience, I'm sorry. Spencer, we've talked a lot about the need for public policy. We talked about pilots and startups. So quick example, we have a pilot we're running with some state funding that we have EV car share at a housing authority location, very low income population, lack of access to adequate transportation, and as opposed to like the point-to-point car share program we created with CARB support in the city of LA. This one's dedicated just for the residents. The charging is maintained by one of our startups, Charger Help, which is employing some former oil and gas workers from refineries who now fix EV charging stations, and another startup, Envoy, which is managing the car share program. But what's great about it is we're seeing it scale. Congresswoman Barragan, who represents that area, and the Port of LA, likes the program, thinks it's really exciting. It's going to introduce legislation to scale it nationally. But we know, as Mary talked about, policy regulations are important, but sometimes we also need, that legislation to help scale to meet the moment. What, given your role with Audi, with the work we're doing together, what's a policy you think would help us not just achieve our goals in LA that we've set together, but the governor's goals and President Biden's goals have 50% of all the cars sold to be electric?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a detailed policy wonk conversation. Well, I do, but I won't. Because there are some interesting, actually very specific policies that work on the demand side of the equation, right? We've, through Mary's leadership and a lot of the existing policies, they work on the supply side, but there's a limit to that, and you have to work on the demand side. But I would say, let me step back and speak more sort of holistically. I think this notion of getting to a full transformation, this notion of 100% is so important, because anything less than that muddies the conversation. Well, maybe we can sell part of this technology and we'll still be able to have this incumbent polluting technology exist forever. And that just confuses the industry. It confuses the consumer. And I think, as much as this may not be a perspective shared by all of my colleagues in the auto industry, I think the rhetorical strength of saying, no, we're going through full transformation gets everyone's thinking aligned. Okay, we're not going to go half measures. We're not going to do 30% of the fleet. We're on a trajectory that hits 100%, that we're, I think, as Brian so eloquently said, we're going from an agrarian society to an industrial revolution moment, right? It's a step change. We're going from a fossil-dominated internal combustion engine technology to a non-fossil, hopefully 100% clean electricity, which the state of California has already committed to as well. And in the West Coast, we have the advantage of access to a lot of clean electricity. This is going to be a beautiful thing. And the last thing I'll say, again, it's not to answer your policy question. We're making vehicles that are actually more fun to drive. It's a better experience to get in our electric vehicle than to get in our internal combustion version. I have tried both. Audi has a great reputation of making great cars, but when I get in our electric vehicles and I hit the accelerator, it's instantaneous. It's a fantastic experience. Once we get enough people into our electric cars, they're not going to want to go back to the internal combustion engine car. So I think this is what policy has sort of kickstarted, but it is now the industry's opportunity. For those of us that are willing to get out in front of that bow wave, I think it's an opportunity for us to actually dominate the industry, and Audi's really excited to be at the forefront of this. So listen, I think regulation will continue to be necessary, particularly to bring the laggards along, or sort of say, hey, here's the floor, and this floor is going to continue to raise. We are going to try to outpace the regulation. We're not going to be driven by the regulation. I do think there are opportunities to create additional incentives to work on the demand side, and incentives for us. I think the ZEV mandate it's a mandate, right? But how could you use the LCFS, the low carbon fuel standard, for an example, to actually incentivize us to bring more product to market quicker? I think there's some actually interesting, again, not to bore folks with the details of that policy, there's some actual neat opportunities to evolve the LCFS so that you actually are creating a stronger draw for us to bring models into the market.
Thank you. I think the Assemblywoman was waiting for you to give her a bill idea for the next session. Thank you for being here, Assemblywoman. Appreciate your leadership. All right. Well, we have a couple minutes left. Any questions from the audience?
Sure. So there's a California think tank called the Pacific Research Institute. There's an economist there named Wayne Weingart recently published a paper just last month showing that competitive energy markets are decarbonizing faster and cheaper than more monopoly-dominated energy markets, almost 2/3 as fast. And Wayne's also done one of the reasons for that is that the competitive markets are more tuned to market signals. They take incentives better. The monopolies are slow to react to the incentives, and the competitive players react faster. And he's also argued for incentives like something called clean tax cuts, where you would, for instance, for a transportation company, charge no taxes on the profits that are earned on zero-emission vehicles, so that you make them much more profitable for the automobile companies, for the trucking companies, for the shipbuilders, for the people who are building things like the zero-emission ports. You allow them to use things like tax-exempt bonds that are private, so that they have these effects. So my question to you is, how much further can we take California's power market in a more competitive direction to allow those market forces to work better? And how can we use incentives like the clean tax cut idea that Wayne has written about, for the transportation industry? What do you think of those ideas?
I think that was directed to the regulated entity in the room.
Well, I can talk about the energy markets, and I'm sure maybe we'll have some answers on the tax side. California has a competitive energy market today. It's run by the California Independent System Operator. At Edison, for instance, Southern California Edison, we only generate about 20% of the electricity we provide to customers. 80% of that we procure out on the open market. We have seen the benefits of that. I think the market plus the requirements in California. So we do have a renewables portfolio standard. We have a requirement to go procure zero emission renewable energy that we deliver to our customers. Today, about 43% of the power that we deliver to customers is renewables. All of it doesn't count in the California market. Some of our large hydro that we do own doesn't count towards that requirement. But 43% emission free is well on our way to 100%. The California ISO has put in some new market mechanisms. So you're probably aware of the energy imbalance market. It allows California as well as the surrounding states to benefit from the renewables that are available across the West. And so we have a number of utilities outside of California that are currently participating in that energy imbalance market. It's a benefit to California consumers. It's also a benefit to those utilities that are outside of California. They're moving forward now with an extended day-ahead market, EDAM. That conversation is currently underway around how that would be run. Again, it's a competitive market. It would allow consumers across the West to benefit from the resources that are available. As Spencer noted, there are a lot of renewables already in the West and more coming, generally as a result of more the state requirements, so not just in California, but across the West. And so I think the EDAM could be a prelude to a larger Western energy market. We've seen moves by the Southwest Power Pool, by the Northwest as well. A number of states have ordered their utilities to become part of a regional transmission organization. We don't currently have one in the West. California Independent System Operator is just an ISO, not an RTO at the moment. And so I think there's a great opportunity for more activity in this space. And so moving from the energy imbalance market to the extended day ahead market and then beyond, I think great opportunity. In terms of tax credits, you know, I think those are always useful. You're seeing a lot of that discussion currently underway now in Washington and with the reconciliation package. We see great benefits in that. I do think it helps customers, not just credits, but what's the other? The production tax credits as well, right? So oftentimes what we do hear from customers though is that they still have to put the money out first before they can get the benefit. And so we have to also think about ways to ensure that there is funding for them to move forward and not just through the credit system. I don't know if you guys get
Yeah. Try to get to one more question.
Zero tax rates, not tax credits, zero tax rates on your profits.
You got to move to one more question. Chip?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for your leadership. Two questions. Number one, at Audi, what plans do you have for me to represent my 2001 TT? It's hard for me to give up that car.
There's probably a company in Matt's incubator that could probably do it for you. I'll have to talk to you later about that. It's out of my area of expertise.
What percentage of California's energy mix is renewable? What percentage is not renewable? In terms of charging up these fleets, LA is going to be 100% EV by 2028 to hit the marks. And we're going to hit the other marks that we mentioned today. We have to have clean power generation.
Let me answer it first from a car manufacturer. Carolyn will give you the detailed answer, and Mary knows this as well. There is this stubborn perception that's out there that, well, if your electricity isn't fully decarbonized, it's better to drive an internal combustion engine vehicle. In fact, even in Europe, where they're seeing EV sales boom, there's this sort of stubborn perspective that still is trotted out there, and it's completely wrong. Even with the current grid mix today, pretty much anywhere in the United States, there's maybe one or two small exceptions to this rule. Driving an electric vehicle is better from an environmental standpoint, and not just air quality. So listen, I want you to get your answer.
Well.
No, but I'm just answering the broader question because this is a debate that actually isn't helpful. Not that you're asking the wrong question. It's a good question, but I just wanted to address that from an automaker standpoint. There are very few places, certainly in the US, where it's not even like close, right? So I'll let Carolyn give the detailed answer on LA.
Well, I would just talk about LA. So the mayor, you know, we set some bold targets and moved the utility, the largest municipal utility in the country, quite forward. But more recently, the mayor and the chief sustainability officer and the head of DWP, Marty Adams, committed to getting to 100% by 2035, but they're going to be at 97%, I think, by 2030 of clean energy. And that's going to involve taking a gas plant and converting it to renewable hydrogen, which if they can figure that out, that's a game changer for not just, you know, this power plant, but for a lot of utilities across the country, if we can figure out how to get renewable green hydrogen at scale.
And I just think, you know, as we move towards 100% clean energy in California, it's a lot of construction. It not just power plants, but the transmission lines to bring them in. We're also looking at small scale, so both community and distributed resources as well. I think there are so many opportunities to bring that, and then storage, right? So a lot of energy storage. You're seeing that come online in California. We just announced a deal last week for 537 megawatts of energy storage to come online by summer of 2022. So it's an aggressive schedule to bring it on to ensure reliability of the system. But it's being built. It's being built across the West, but you know, within the CAISO, it's in California and the nodes that attach to the California ISO, and that's transmission as well. So more transmission that needs to be built. It has to be faster. So there are going to be needs to change the process in order to assure that we hit the schedules that we need for 2030.
Right, Mary, yeah.
And they're going to be cars generating their own electricity in a few years. We're facing all these choices kind of at the same time, and we're going to probably run down many different paths at the same time. But eventually, I believe that you're going to see solar-powered cars that are running on their own generated electricity.
Can I just
Brian.
ask a question? Because it seems to me there's a real harmony here, which is very healthy, incredibly healthy. And California seems to be in a position to really be a trendsetter. To actually be, I think you could afford to be a little aggressive, a little more aggressive than you are. You're a little bit humble about doing it. But I don't know you, madam, but I'm incredibly impressed. And I think that you can actually just step up to the plate a little. You're a little tentative about it, but you seem to me to have the answer. And you can get that together between all of you. I don't think there's any reason why California cannot be the trendsetter.
Thank you, Brian. We agree. Appreciate that. Well, I think we're at time, but thank you again to Brian and Nicole for being here. Appreciate your leadership and your commitment to help us. Thank you to Hannah for all your help today. Thank you for, let's give everybody a round of applause. To the Climate Registry and the Climate Action Reserve for all their support, and of course, the Mayor of Phoenix and my dear friends, Carolyn, Mary, and Spencer for being here today. Really appreciate you joining us. Let's go do it.